Hi, my name is Trina. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing another monthly wrap-up, this one for September. September was a solid month, let's say. I read 11 books, but 3 of them were incredibly short novellas. One was a short story, and that was kind of intentional. I wanted to slow down a lot. I had a lot of travel plans going on, just a lot of life stuff going on, and I was hoping to slow down a little bit in my reading during the fall. Not that I didn't love reading a ton during the summer when I had time for it, but it was also hitting a point where I was like setting an expectation for myself of reading that much, and I don't want to do that. I want to read a lot when it happens that I'm in the mood for it and be able to slow down when I'm not in the mood for it. And this month wasn't as much in the mood, but we still hit our reading goal, which is 8 books a month. So good work there. I was also working on a couple of longer books in the background throughout the month that I haven't finished yet, so that won't be in the wrap up, but that took up a little bit more time. For example, I read about like half of Emma, and I'm actually, unfortunately, like this is a shocker, I'm gonna soft DNF Emma for now. I just was not in the mood for it. It wasn't hitting for me. All of Jane Austen's books so far, all 4 that I've read so far, have been 5 stars, and I've loved them with all my heart. So if I'm not in the mood or in the headspace to read Emma, I'm gonna have a little break, take some time off, and then try to come back to it later on when I might be more really craving Jane Austen again. And I'm also reading Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, loving that. Just taking it super slow, reading one essay at a time when I'm in nature and stuff like that. But enough said, let's get into the books that I did read in September. As per usual, I'll give a little summary, my rating, the reasons for the rating. My ratings, as a disclaimer, always really personal to me, just about how I felt about the book while reading it, and are not like the final word on the book ever. It's just how I felt when I was reading it, and that can change from month to month. Okay, I started out the month by getting into a little bit of a reading slump. So I want to talk about the 3 books that kind of I read before taking like a 2-week break from reading. Starting off, the first book I finished in September was Swordcrossed by Freya Marske. This is a new release that I picked up because I loved the last romantasy series, really, that Freya Marske wrote, that started with A Marvelous Light and ended with A Power Unbound, and the middle one's A Restless Truth. I liked all those books. I kind of liked them less and less as the series went on. I think A Marvelous Light was one of the first books I read getting back into reading a few years ago, so maybe my rating was inflated there or something like that. But Swordcrossed is the newest book. It's set in like an alternate fantasy world where there are some things that are like recognizable to us as Victorian Regency era England, and then there are some things that are very fantastical and very different. I think the book does kind of a confusing job of laying out that world. I would have loved, at least my version didn't have a map at the beginning. I would have loved a map of the city and the world. I would have loved like a guide in the beginning of the book to talk through like the characters' relationships and the webs of relationships, because I thought the world was really cool, just difficult to understand. Because at first you think it's just like Regency England, and then more and more fantasy elements are introduced. The main one in this book is that when you are married, their like gods or their religion have a tradition that instead of saying I object at a wedding, you can challenge the groom to a duel, basically, for the hand of his soon-to-be wife. Although same-sex marriage is also very normalized in this fantasy world, so I'm assuming you can do it with either partner in the wedding proceedings. But basically that is the role of a best man in this world, is to be that duelist, to like answer that challenge if it comes up. Our main character, Maddie, is about to enter into an arranged marriage to save his family, and he knows that the girl he's planning on marrying has this guy who's obsessed with her, who is going to challenge him to a duel, so he needs a really good duelist, and he hires Luca for that task. As you can probably tell by me laying this out, I think that the lead-up is very convoluted for a standalone romantasy. The world building is also very convoluted for that, and I was intrigued by it for sure, but being intrigued by the fantasy world building and like wanting to know more about it and getting frustrated or interested by those plot details kind of took me away from getting like emotionally connected to either of the main characters, especially Luca, the duelist character. Luca's just very abrasive to Maddie for no apparent reason. Like he's just like very mean-spirited, and Maddie is like eternally patient, and I'm just like, you don't have to be with this guy. Like, I never really understood why Maddie was so attracted to Luca when Luca was just really annoying for 70% of the book. But with all that being said, I did give this 3.5 stars. It feels kind of high in hindsight, but I remember liking the ending a lot, and I think I'd just gotten off some significantly worse romantasy books when I read this from August. Enjoyed it enough to give it 3.5 stars. I really, really liked how the ending wrapped up. I liked the side characters that were introduced to a lot, like Maddie's fiance, Maddie's sister, Maddie's whole family. And I would just like to see Freya Marske just write a fantasy book instead of being like, let's write a romantasy, because I didn't really care for the romance very much in this, but I thought the fantasy world was pretty interesting and like the political intrigue was intriguing. I will admit I was intrigued, and I liked the way that that was wrapped up in the end. But yeah, that is Swordcrossed. Then after finishing Swordcrossed, I finished a book for a vlog, so I won't talk about it very much. I finished The Once and Future Witches by Alix Harrow. I have a whole vlog talking about my mixed feelings about this. I really, really struggled to get through The Once and Future Witches. This is another fantasy kind of based in a world that looks somewhat similar to ours world in New Salem in the late 1800s. They live in a world in which magic used to exist, but has been like hunted, they believe, to extinction. But we learn throughout the book that magic still does exist, and that our main characters, these three sisters, Juniper, Beatrice, and Agnes, are kind of looking for and like being found by this tower of magic, and like that would reintroduce magic to their world, and that would also probably help them with like feminist issues and like giving women the power to protect themselves. I liked most of those things, and I liked, in theory, a lot of things about this book, but I really struggled to get through it. I thought the pacing was just off. I think that the writing style was just very like flowery and beautiful in a way that worked for the short stories and fables that were like interjected throughout this book, but that didn't necessarily work for like a 400+ page fantasy novel. I really didn't like Juniper's character and struggled with her through the end of the book, and she really is like the main character of the three sisters. Not a wholly positive update. I gave this book 3 stars because I switched to the audiobook in the second half and enjoyed it so much more. I felt like the audiobook actually made me connect to the characters, and I was rooting for them all of a sudden, and I was getting into it, but I did do that like the very last second. So I would say if you pick this up and it's not working for you, switch to the audiobook sooner than when I did it, because I feel like maybe if I had started with the audiobook or like tried it in the beginning when I wasn't totally feeling the writing style, then it might have helped me like get into the story and stick with it more consistently than I did. But that is The Once and Future Witches by Alix Harrow. After that, I had a plane trip, my first of many this last month, my god. But I had a plane trip to California, long plane trip. I needed a nice romance to read when you're like half exhausted on the plane, you don't want to fully pay attention. So I picked up Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. What can I say about Deep End? It has been so long, and I did read it while sleep deprived, but it is a contemporary romance set on a college campus that follows Scarlett, who is a competitive diver on the swimming and dive team for this university, and like is very, very good at it, but she had a bad fall or bad dive some years ago that has made it like impossible for her to do one type of dive and has really been struggling with it. And then at the same time, she runs in the same circles as Lucas, a Swedish member of the swim team. They're in the swim and dive team together, who used to date one of her diver friends, and they recently broke up because he's really into BDSM and she was not. And surprise, surprise, our main character Scarlett hears about this, and she's also very into BDSM, and her and Lucas end up hooking up. Now, perfect for a plane trip. If I'd read this at any other point, I would have given it like 1 or 2 stars. As it stands, I gave it 3 stars because it was great for a plane ride. My 2 major issues: BDSM from the beginning of the story is like a large part of this book. Like, beware, it is like a smut contemporary romance book, but also there just wasn't enough of it at the same time. I felt like it was weirdly unbalanced, where like Ali Hazelwood was trying to write something palatable to a general audience about a very niche topic, and I'm like, you have to commit to one or the other. Either it's gonna be palatable or it's not gonna be, and for me that middle road just didn't work. And then also my main complaint with this book, Lucas is Swedish, I'm Swedish, I'm in Sweden right now. Everything he does in this book is described as Swedish. It's so... At first it was like hilarious. Literally when I started this book, I was on a 50-minute flight, my first flight of many, between Göteborg and Copenhagen, and it was a flight with like a bunch of Swedish people who were doing it for like business, like their daily flight, and we're all like talking super loudly and being really obnoxious. And I was like reading this book where Ali Hazelwood was like, yeah, Swedish men, just the most respectful, best men that could ever exist. Every single Swedish man she's introduced to in this book is like, wow, they're all so great. And I'm like, sitting here in this plane being like, okay, relax a little bit, relax on the Swedish superiority complex going on in this book. And then also just like his accent is constantly highlighted. It just comes up so often. Everything he does is described as, oh, he does this. Of course he does this because it's Swedish. I just found it like comical, and then I found it annoying near the end of the book where I was like, this is a 500-page contemporary romance book. How many more times can she tell us that this man is Swedish? Like, we get it. We get it. So Ali Hazelwood, kind of a mixed result. This is only my second book from her. I really liked Bride, her first book. So I might just stick to her books set in like a fantasy setting, because I was not a huge fan of the contemporary elements here, like the references to our own world and actual countries and stuff like that. I'm just looking for a fun time, and I feel like near the end, Deep End stopped being a fun time. You know, in the first half, good time. Second half, I was like, this is so long. Oh my god. And I read it all in one flight, and it still felt very, very long. So those are the 3 books in the beginning of the month. Then, like I said, I went on like a 1.5, 2 week trip for my birthday and didn't read at all that whole trip. And I had plans. I was planning on doing like a birthday reading vlog and stuff like that. I was in the mood, and I'm like, I'm not gonna force myself to do something I don't want to do on my birthday. So I just didn't read at all for that trip. I was like, you know what? When I get home, I can pick up a book again. And I did. When I was home back here in Sweden, then I needed to like get back into reading. So amongst some other books, I also read 3 shorter books, 1 short story, 2 novellas, and I can talk about those next. The first one I finished was the short story that I read for the Alix Harrow reading vlog. I read The 6 Deaths of the Saint by Alix Harrow. This is a short story about a young woman who is sort of like blessed by this like saint of war, I think, yeah, as a child, and as long as she fights for this prince, he becomes king. It's told in this like very fable-esque way that I loved. The main character doesn't even get a name. She's just the knight, or the girl in the beginning, and the woman. It's very, very short, like 38 pages or something like that, and really good. I really liked it. I thought it was quick and interesting and fun, and for a short story, it was 100% like a 5-star short story. I really loved it. It just, again, it was very short. I read it in one afternoon, so it's not gonna have the sort of emotional impact that a longer book would have for me. So I did give it like a very loving 4 stars. Maybe if I reread it over and over and over again, then I'll spend enough time with the story to give it 5 stars, or maybe if I tried the audiobook, I don't know. I really did like it, and I thought it was a pretty short story that I would recommend, and you can check out my vlog if you want to know more of my like in the moment reactions to it, but not quite like a favorite of all time or anything like that. But it did break me out of my reading slump. Like I 100%, after this short story, I started picking up so many more books, and that was really fun as well. The next book I finished was a novella, a little bit longer than the last book, but still relatively short, audiobook called Queen Bee, The Story of Anne Boleyn, Witch Queen by Juno Dawson. This is a short story prequel, kind of, set in the world of the Her Majesty's Royal Coven series. You must be sick to death of hearing me talk about this series. I read the Her Majesty's Royal Coven series this summer, loved it, even though I thought the ending was a little bit quirky. So I was like, you know what, let me read the short story in this world. The audiobook came in from the library, and I was like, let me give this a listen. And I loved this. Maybe it's because it was an audiobook, so I spent more time with the story, but it really, really worked for me. I gave it 4.5 stars, almost a 5-star, the same rating I gave the Her Majesty's Royal Coven book. This short story is set in the time of Anne Boleyn, shocker, directly after her execution. In this book, it basically takes the position that Anne Boleyn was a witch and she had a coven, and this novella kind of deals with the after effects of her coven after she's executed. What do they do? And it follows primarily Grace Fairfax, one of her ladies, it's a fun take on historical fantasy. And I really, really liked it. I liked Grace's characters, but I also liked all the other perspective characters we get. As per usual, I think Juno Dawson is just so good at writing like nuanced, flawed women characters who aren't bad people but can do bad things, or are good people but can also do bad things, and just like they're all complex. They're not one thing anytime. I feel like Juno Dawson achieved that again in this book, and I really, really loved it. I don't think you need to read the main trilogy, the OG trilogy, to read this short story. I think it stands on its own. You might just be confused about some of like the way that the magical powers work, because they're not super explained in this book. But I would definitely recommend picking up this short story, giving it a listen or a read, and if you like the writing style, if you like the way that the characters are written, 100% try Her Majesty's Royal Coven as well. That was Queen Bee, the story of Anne Boleyn. Then the other short story I read in the second half of September was also in another series. I read The Jade Setter of Janloon by Fonda. I love Fonda so much. This is a novella set in her Greenbone Saga series, Jade City, Jade War, Jade Legacy. You know I love that trilogy. I love that trilogy. I don't talk about it enough on this channel just because, I don't know, it doesn't come up a ton, but I love the Greenbone Saga and I 100% want to reread it sometime soon. This novella made me even more want to reread it. If you know the OG trilogy, this is set like right before the OG trilogy starts, maybe like half a year or something like that before Jade City. But we follow a totally like different little group of characters, where the Greenbone Saga follows this kind of clan family, like this family dynasty of very powerful people fighting against other very powerful people. The Jade Setter Janloon follows a couple of like low-level individuals on the ground of Janloon in this city, and we're following the shop of a man called Essen, who is trying to maintain neutrality amongst the Greenbone clans. And in this world, if you don't know the original series, jade gives you magical power, so people wear it on their body, so people like to wear it in ornamental ways, and he works with it when people acquire new jade to like fit jewelry for them or things like that. In the beginning of the short story, a crime is committed, and we basically follow the Jade Setter's apprentice, Pulo, as he's trying to solve this crime and save a friend of his and save this jade shop. And I really grew to like Pulo's character at first. I was like, oh god, is this gonna be like an annoying kid character? But no, I grew to really enjoy him and like really root for him and stand up for him. I liked all the characters. I loved Mala, I loved Essen. If you can't tell by my tone and my rapid pace discussion, this was a 5-star novella for me. Shocking, I know. 5 stars is kind of crazy, but I missed this world so much. And slight reveal about the short story, characters from the main series pop up on the page here. Like Hilo and Lan are on the page in this book, and when they came up, I like almost cried. I was like, oh my god, I miss them. I miss them so much. Just like this little glimpse into their lives before this series starts meant everything to me, on top of already enjoying the characters that this novella was about. You can read it without reading the main series, but you probably won't enjoy it without reading the main series, and I wouldn't really recommend. At least I would recommend reading Jade City before picking up the Jade Setter of Janloon, but for me it was so great because I've read the whole trilogy, and it's been a little while since I read the whole trilogy, so I really missed the world and the characters, so it hit all the harder for me because of that. If you want the same experience that I had reading it, then just wait until you're really missing this series, but you can't justify like a 2,000-page reread, and just pick up the Jade Setter of Janloon because it was really stunning. Okay, in the next category of books I can talk about, and these are basically books I picked up because I thought they were going to be 5 stars, so I wanted to pick them up around my birthday and read 5-star books around my birthday. For the most part, that was successful, which we'll talk about, but the first book I read for that was You Weren't Meant to Be Human by Andrew Joseph White. This is an adult horror by Andrew Joseph White, one of my favorite YA horror authors. This is his adult debut that follows the character of Crane, who is living in like a alien cult, sort of, in a gas station in West Virginia. And Crane is going through it. Crane has some serious like struggles both with himself and with the world around him, and that's how he's ended up in an alien cult. But this alien cult is like the first place where he has felt, I don't know, like something, like he is just longing to feel something that he can't really like grasp. And he loves this alien cult because it's the first place he's felt sane and like felt like himself. But it's not all perfect. He has a boyfriend who's also part of the cult, and basically the plot of this book is that the boyfriend gets him pregnant. He's a trans man, so he gets pregnant in the beginning of the book because he thinks testosterone keeps you from getting pregnant. Turns out it's not a foolproof method. So Crane gets pregnant at the beginning of the book, and the aliens won't let him get an abortion. The aliens want this baby for some reason, and Crane doesn't know why and doesn't understand why, and it's torture for him, basically, to go through with this pregnancy. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. I wouldn't recommend it to everyone. This is a really actually like probably one of the darkest books I've read. Yeah, this might be the darkest book I've ever read, just in terms of what Crane does to himself in his suffering, in his agony. I think there are major trigger warnings for this book that you 100% need to read before reading this, because there's some stuff like in the late parts of the book that like if you're not prepared for might like really ruin the book for you, or like worse. And I think while it's written with a lot of understanding and care, Andrew Joseph White in his author notes at the end of the book talks about how it's a very also like personal depiction of feelings and sentiments that the author had. So I think it's also very harsh because of that. It's very like straightforward and direct about feelings that the author may have also struggled with in his life. But I just think that it was a really gorgeous book that tackled a lot of modern issues. The book also talks about like cult mentalities and the harm that that can do to individuals who are just looking for somewhere that they can feel safe and whole, can easily be like taken in by forces that want to use that like sense of community for nefarious purposes. So many things are just done incredibly well and very interestingly in this book. And more than that, I devoured it. Just like all of Andrew Joseph White's books, it feels like I read it in like a single day. He is compulsively readable. I feel like his writing style is very straightforward and simple. I don't think the writing style changes that much between his YA and his adult book. And I just think he just nails the pacing every single time, where like you can't put it down, and every time you think like, oh, maybe I should go do something else, then something else happens in the book and you're like, wait, I have to know how this is going to be resolved. I don't have to know what's going to happen at the end of this scene. Really, really good. I don't know if I'm going to be going out and reading a bunch of other like dark horror books. I think it's just Andrew Joseph White that works so well for me. If I think about it, I don't think I like it as much as The Spirit Bares Its Teeth. That one is still not dethroned as my favorite Andrew Joseph White book, but this is definitely my second favorite from him. So that's high praise. So I really, really loved You Weren't Meant to Be Human. But yeah, big tonal switch to the next book that I finished, which was something I was actually working on like throughout all of September basically. I read The Dawnhounds by Sascha Stronach. This is a sci-fi book inspired by Maori indigenous New Zealand culture about basically a police officer who is working in a very corrupt city, like a very, very corrupt city, dealing with a lot of problems, who relatively early on in the book is shot and killed by 2 other police officers, but wakes up, is brought back to life with some powers that she doesn't really understand. And she's introduced to this crew of pirates that can help her understand those powers and help her hopefully save this city that she's living in, that she loves. I liked a lot of things about this book, but unfortunately there's also a lot of things that I was like, okay, objectively this isn't good, but I should like it, right? And I think a lot of that comes down to pacing, because I really, really struggled to finish it. But I did give The Dawnhounds 3.5 stars, a very loving 3.5 stars. The main character, Yacht's journey is so interesting. All the characters we're introduced to are interesting and unique, and I liked them a lot. I really, really loved the city as a setting. Basically, we're in this sci-fi world where the new innovation is like biotechnology, and so everything is built off of like living things. The houses are essentially large mushrooms. All of their technology is based around like living organisms. Their new guns that they have shoot basically grubs that like eat through the body, which is just like fascinating. So I thought the world building was really sick there, and I wanted to love this so bad because it had the kind of like interesting world building and character building and sense of humor as well that the Locked Tomb series has. But I just felt like the pacing of this book was really weird. There's a very long introduction sequences, lots of scenes of her just walking around this city thinking thoughts. But then there was also like action sequences that kept popping up, and just like the back and forth there was kind of strange that I wasn't a huge fan of. And just in general, it took me like so long to finish it. I was just not in the mood to finish this book. When I did, I was like, wow, I love that. I can't wait to read the sequel. But objectively, it did have its problems in terms of I was very confused about a lot of things in this book. But that being said, it reminds me of my reaction that I had the first time I read Harrow the Ninth, where I was like, what the heck was that? I'm gonna dock points because I didn't understand anything that happened in this book. And the Dawnhounds kind of like felt the same way to me, so I 100% want to reread the Dawnhounds at some point and with like a better understanding of the world, and then hopefully enjoy it much, much more, because it has so much potential. The storyline, the characters, everything. I just needed the pacing to like give me a little bit more. So that was a disappointing book that I thought was gonna be 5 stars. This next book though was another book I picked up that I thought was gonna be 5 stars. I read Under the Udala Trees by Chinelo Okparanta, which is a stunning book that I thought was older than it was. I thought it was like an old classic, but it's only from 2015. But this is a contemporary written book set in Nigeria some 50, 60 years ago during the Nigerian Civil War. And the book starts off with this young girl living with her parents during the Nigerian Civil War, who is sent away by her mother to live with a friend because her mother like can't deal with the war. And while living with those friends of her mother's, she meets this girl that she falls in love with. And the book basically follows the main character, Ijeoma, I think her name is pronounced, as she grows up and struggles and deals with the fact that she is a lesbian woman in this world that is not built for lesbian women, basically. Like, her mother is very religious. She lives in a very religious country, she's from a very religious culture. And not only that, but like marriage and children and a certain like layout of your life is very strictly enforced by her friends and family, even like by the people that love her. They still have this like expectation of what her life is going to be. And from a very young age, she realizes that like, if I follow that path in life, I'm not going to be happy. But is that worth it to keep my mother happy? Is it worth it to keep the expectations of the people around me happy? It really is just following Ijeoma through a sequence of events that happens in her life because she's a lesbian living in Nigeria in this time period. And I just really, really loved it. I gave this 5 stars. I thought it was really stunning. I think if you're going into it with a certain expectation of like it's going to be like a love story or something like that, it's not going to be to your taste. But it is a book about love and about this love that is not accepted in large swaths of the world still to this day, and the way that people can carve out niches of love for themselves anyways, and just so many things. I really, really love this book. I really loved Ijeoma. For me, this is an instant classic and was just gorgeous, and so many beautiful lines as well, but very readable, very like straightforward and simple and understandable, and also taught me a lot about Nigerian Civil War and the conflict in Nigeria in the late 1900s that I didn't know about before this. So if you enjoy like queer classics, then I think you would love this. I loved it. So that is Under the Udala Trees by Chinelo Okparanta. And with that, we are reaching the end of the month. The last 2 books I'm going to talk about are actually in a reading vlog that is going to come out relatively soon. I couldn't, stupid order of books and reading and stuff like that. It took me longer than expected. But they are books I'm going to be doing like whole vlogs talking about detailed reactions of. So I'm not going to talk about them super, super long. I'm going to let you just wait. And then when that vlog comes out, I'll link it to this video, I guess, in like a week or something like that. But first off, I did read Inkblood Sister Scribe by Törzs. It's like a contemporary fantasy book about 2 sisters whose family like have long been stewards of this library of magical books. And they are now like separated for reasons that get explained throughout the book. One of the sisters is constantly traveling around the world. She has to move every single year. And in this book, she's currently living in Antarctica, while the other sister is guarding the library after their father passed away a few years before the start of the book. This book is really just like a puzzle where you start out the book being like, okay, why? Why these magical books? Where did they come from? Where is the magic? Why can they not use the magic? Like, why can they only use the magic in certain ways? Who wrote these books? Like questions about the magic system. You also have why is one sister forced to watch the library? Why is it guarded so heavily? Who would be coming after them for these books? You have why their father died. He was killed by one of the books. Why did that happen? And then the most important one is probably, why are you living in Antarctica? Why are you forced to flee every single year? And as the book continues, the first half of the book especially just keeps laying out more questions for you and then solving them and then laying more questions out. And it just felt like such a fun puzzle to read. I think if you like just being introduced to a magic system throughout the entire course of a book, the puzzle aspect of it really, really appealed to me. I don't know if everyone will love this because there wasn't a ton of plot happening in it. I think the author does a good job, throws a couple of, enough for me at least, of plot going into it. The best part about this is the relationships between the characters that are built up and them all working through what has happened to them in their life, what has happened to their families, how did they get to this point, and why. I really, really loved it, especially it just left off on such a great note of like, there was this amazing found family dynamic in the last like 20% of the book that I was just obsessed with and loved. I loved all the characters in this book, and it really, really worked for me, and I wasn't expecting it at all because I knew nothing about this book, and the summary gives away very little about it because part of the joy of the book, I feel like, is getting to know it as you go. I did give it 4.5 stars. When I first finished it, I gave it 5 stars. Now in hindsight, I was like, 5 stars is so high. I don't know if I should really give it 5 stars. It's definitely up there. It's definitely up there in the 4.5 5-star range. I would just say like, it's not necessarily like, I wasn't like super emotionally impacted, which is why it would keep it from being a 5-star. But also in hindsight, I was super emotionally impacted and I loved it. I don't know, somewhere in that range. We'll give it a 4.5 because I like to round down, but that was Inkblood Sister Scribe by Emma Törzs. And then the last book I finished in September was also for that vlog, so I'll keep it short and sweet. But I'm very excited to say that I finally finished Blood Over Brighthaven by Emma Wang. This is a fantasy book set in like a world, sorry for the ambient rain noise if that's coming through on this camera. It is pouring outside right now. But Blood Over Brighthaven is a fantasy book set in a world where there is a city basically in the middle of this landscape, and anyone who doesn't live in the city is vulnerable to this disease called blight that takes and kills people. And we start out with the book with one of our main characters, Thomil, fleeing with his entire family and tribe to get into this city to try to be safe from the blight. Because not only is the blight killing individual people, it's also killing animals for their food source and trees that they need to grow food, all of these things. And basically we learn after Thomil gets into the city, the Quen, the people from the tribes outside of the city, are very much looked down upon in like a very violent way where they're not seen as human beings by the people of the city. Even when they get inside, they're only kept alive if they're capable of doing work, menial labor that the city people don't want to do in their factories. Then we switch to our other main character, Skyana, and through her perspective, we learn that even for the people from the city, it's a very divided society because there's a lot of patriarchy and misogyny built into the city's customs and religion, and their magic is very heavily based on their religion. And it basically says women are too weak-minded to be mages, but our main character, Skyana, is determined to prove that wrong, and she goes in to take the exam to become a high mage in this society. She and Thomil eventually meet because of like racist mockery by the other mages assigning him to be her assistant instead of like a proper assistant. And the two of them start uncovering the secrets of this world and figuring out how they can change it. But more importantly, Skyana learns about the situation for the Quen and like learns basically to treat the Quen like human beings, which in the beginning of the book she does not do. And then we just keep going from there into like really interesting critiques and world building that's meant to reflect our own world in really interesting ways, and I really liked that. I gave this book 4.5 stars, like a solid 4.5 stars, because I think that the messaging and the magic system building and the world building was 100% 5 stars and so interesting, and the character dynamics and what they went through was also 5 stars. But I just felt like the writing style didn't necessarily totally emotionally connect me to the characters 100%. Like the ending, I was kind of like, oh, that was a good ending. And I realized I wasn't sitting there like heartbroken, heart-wrenched, like, oh, in my feels. I think it's a very, very loving 4.5 stars where I'm like, this is such a good book. And I'm so excited to see Emma Wang become an even better writer as she keeps going. In my vlog, I'll go into so much more about why I thought the magic system and everything was so good. But yeah, that is Blood Over Brighthaven by Emma Wang. As you can see, I ended the month on just banger after banger after banger. 5 star, 5 star, 4.5 star. It was really, really great. So I'm so happy to go into my October reading on such a positive note. I already have so many books I need to pick up, more fall books as well and everything like that. But yeah, with that, that is the end of the wrap up. Thank you for sticking around for me yapping about books. I hope you got some recommendations from the pile. Let me know if you've read any of these books and you have opinions. If you disagree with me, I'm really, really interested to hear why. Or if you agree with me, then I also would love to hear that. And as always, feel free to shoot over what you've been reading in September, any books you would recommend or not recommend. Let me know. Thank you. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, whatever you feel like doing on this lovely day. And I hope to see you all really soon in another video. Toodles!